Meeting our own needs, fulfilling our own needs is the only way to create change and growth for ourselves, right? So my clients are coming to me with anything. The answer is meeting our own needs, right? The answer to almost every problem is getting your needs met, right? So how, right? That's the work, is learning how to acknowledge, understand, hear, sit with our needs in order to be able to fulfill them. If we are not connected to ourselves, if we are not in the habit of listening to ourselves, right? Of sitting with what's coming up on a daily basis and understanding this is where I'm at, this is what I'm feeling, building that trust and connection with ourselves so that our system feels safe to acknowledge, let alone express and attain our needs, right? Because when we've learned to cope, right? When we're stuck in patterns and programming of hyper-independence and self-reliance to the point of self-detriment, that requires us to mask our own needs, right? Our entire identity has been built around ignoring our needs, right? Because when it's all on you, right? When you cannot trust, when you cannot rely on others to provide and fulfill your needs, right? And you learn you have to do everything on your own. You can only have the needs, right? You can only allow yourself the needs that you can fulfill, right? So the need for love and connection gets booted to the side because you have a need for food, right? And you're the only one who can fulfill that need. And if you can't need something that isn't being given to you, right? Your body, like your nervous system cannot handle as a kid, you not getting a need met. So you adjust your needs to avoid the pain and disappointment of not having the need fulfilled. Does that make sense? Right? Because that is the origin story for all of us, right? So we have learned, right? Because we couldn't rely on others, there is so much that we have to ignore and dismiss. We have to completely disconnect from our bodies. We have to completely self-abandon our emotions, our needs, because we have to survive. In order to do this, we have to focus on controlling the environment, managing the moods of the household, getting ourselves and maybe our siblings fed. And, there's so much that self-reliance teaches us to ignore, right? So the hyper independence and the self-reliance in itself, because it had to early on, masks our unmet needs, right? Because we created the identity and the coping mechanisms of the hyper independence and self-reliance to avoid facing the unmet need, right? So a lot of us tend to cope with isolation, right? Which in turn means a lot of us equate silence with peace, right? You can't function You can't feel like you can take a breath unless you are completely closed off from everything. Not even a dog barking, like dogs barking used to like send me up a wall. You cannot feel any ease, right? And our baseline of ease is other people's like hypertension. Like, let's be clear. But the thing is, you can't feel any sort of ease in the presence of others because you can't trust other people, right? So you're constantly faced with carrying the emotions and moods of others, right? Because it's all on you from the get-go. You are in a state of always having to think about carrying everything for yourself and other people. So, in order for you to feel any sense of autonomy or ease, right? And like I said, on our baseline scale of what ease is, I say, let's put ease in like some big ass air quotes, but you have to isolate, right? Because only in isolation do you have enough silence, lack of stimulation, and complete control of the moment, right? Because as soon as someone else steps into the picture, you are now having to do the mental gymnastics of what it takes to be around other people, right? And it's not even like conscious work that you're doing, but it takes so much more energy for those of us operating in hyperindependence and self-reliance. It takes so much more energy for us to be around other people because other people is, oh wait, like for us, right? In those patterns, right? When we're in that coping mechanism, is a heaviness, is a weight because we are responsible for everything. So we can't set down anything until we have a complete dismissal or removal from the stimulus of other people and just outside experience, period. Right? And that's why, isolation feels so comforting and feels so self-soothing, right? But we're completely disconnected from what we actually need. Like our number one need as humans is love and connection, right? So when you're operating in patterns and programming of hyper independence, I mean, like, it's not literal. I mean, excuse me, it's not figurative. It's not just a saying. It's not, you literally, that coping mechanism, right, that you've created because you had to, is making it impossible for you to acknowledge, let alone allow yourself to have your greatest human need fulfilled, right? You cannot feel safe managing the emotions of other people that you think you need to do, right? Like you need to manage the thoughts and feelings and judgments and all the things of all these other people, right? That's kind of what we learn. You cannot hold that because you had to give up holding that for yourself because that would have been met with nothing but pain and disappointment as a kid, right? So your body cannot feel safe outside of isolation, without that isolation, until you reparent and rewire that coping mechanism. Hyper-independence requires isolation for safety. You cannot cope with that coping mechanism and feel anything other than isolation is safety. Isolation and control. And the only place you can have complete control is when you are in full isolation. Are you with me here? I'm trying to say this as many ways as I can so that at some point it clicks for everybody. So in order to fulfill our needs, we have to start unmasking them. And the only way we can do that is to start to build that connection and that safety and learn how to be in our bodies in a way as someone who is operating in hyper independence has never been able to do on their own, right? Because when you are unintentionally moving, or when you are not intentionally trying to change something within yourself, your body and your brain are autopiloting to your patterns and programming that are in your system, right? That little kid is behind the wheel until you build enough trust with them for them to let you drive, and or you are paying attention often enough to where they don't sneak back behind the wheel. Okay, I feel like I'm starting to tangent, so I'm gonna try to wrap it up here. But one of the biggest reasons you are stuck in anything, and probably a lot of everything in your life as someone who is operating in patterns of hyper independence and self-reliance to the point of self-detriment, is because the only path to safety that is wired into your bones is isolation. And that alone means you are incapable of having your number one human need for love and connection fulfilled to the point where that would feel safe.